many changes in education. This was due partly to the changing demands of the workplace and the dramatic increase in the number of students who opted to continue their education to senior level. These changes, although not obvious in physical structure, were crucial educational developments. Above all, the 80s will be remembered as the proliferation of computers. The revolution of information processing, made possible through computers, meant that computer literacy became obligatory for staff and students.
Mr. Gall, a deputy principal at Wynnum High, played a major role in heightening computer awareness in the school and facilitating sensible gradual changes to reflect the changing needs of students.
And the people who've been at Wynnum, most of the teachers there have been teaching at Wynnum for quite a long time, and there's sort of a culture there as well that you couldn't change. I mean, I think there were people before me tried to change the people at Wynnum without much success.
Did you find that positive, the fact that there's that culture there? Well, there's an element of inflexibility.
It's both positive and it's negative. It doesn't mean it's very difficult to introduce new things and make changes in the place because the school itself has a sort of inertia about it. Or once it gets steam up, like a full head of steam, it just keeps going and it's very hard. All you can do is divert it little by little. You can't make much of a change. You couldn't turn it round in 50 feet, so to speak. You'd have to take a long time and a lot of turning to move it around. So what you do at Wynnum, and what I try to do at Wynnum, is to do things little by little, rather than bringing big changes. So if you want a big change, you've got to work out how many small changes it takes to get there and do those in small ways. But all in all, I found that the staff, for me, very supportive and very friendly. They had their empires, as most schools do, and most Brisbane schools are different from country schools in that respect. They all have their empires, and the empires have taken a fair while to build up, and they're very much a thing of territory and possessions, and this is mine, and it's and what I try to do at the school I'm at now is to try and let people realise that what they got is not theirs but the school's and belongs to the school as a whole, and that's a very difficult thing because there are lots of things in Wynnum that are seen as being mine and not yours, and you can't use it.
In the early 70s, a bright new graduate teacher joined the Wynnum High staff, Mr. Stephen Paul. He probably did not suspect then that he would be returning later in 1987 as principal to help guide Wynnum High School through a period of very rapid and significant changes.
I found the school still very conservative. Conservative not in a reactionary way, but conservative in a steadfast way, if I can put it in that sense. And I really felt that was no longer viable. I also felt that the school needed a touch of discipline. There were features in terms of uniform and student behaviour that I didn't appreciate. I think, in all deference to Merv Miles, my predecessor, he'd been here 14 years and he'd not enjoyed good health for the last couple of years, and I believe that showed in some respects. And I think probably my first reaction was to clean the place out. I succeeded in getting enrolments down by about 60 in the first year, and I think the average intelligence of the school went up commensurately. And having established a reasonable tone in the school, introduced a new uniform, and tried to support the teachers in terms of their dealings with students. We then looked at the curriculum, and I think a number of things that occurred there were fairly significant. The introduction of the senior schooling influence, some new courses, but I take particular pride in my principalship in the improvement in the facilities, and I can cite the building of the fitness centre, the Bill Bryant room as it became known, the drop-in centre. Old areas of the school which had been either junkyards or storage spaces were converted into more useful space. The plaza idea was started, although I regret that never really developed to the extent I would like, but the basis is certainly there. The restaurant up in F Block is another facility of which I'm very proud. The exercise, although looking over here I see it's gone, but I remember the exercise was probably the first thing we did. The multi-purpose shelter behind me was very much our concept. We used the innovation in the curriculum of introducing rugby league as a course as the grounds on which we required a multi-purpose shelter. The school development plan process that we set up sought very much to take account of community views and to take account of what the community wanted. And any principal who doesn't sustain that community support will lose something from what Wynnum High really is. It's very important for me to know that I've been part of the history of Wynnum, that hopefully I've been able to contribute in some small way to the history of Wynnum. It certainly gives me enormous satisfaction. It is a great school, and I take great pride from the fact that I've been part of it.
And they're back working together. As soon as he got there, he saw this in the shop, thought of us here in the library because we've been really good friends, and sent us this because to him that was the supreme. I couldn't touch it for about 12 months. It was so dreadful. But now I'm very proud of myself. I can even pat it. But it reminds me of Murray. Murray, if you ever get to see this, this is your life. So that's why the toad sits here. And the toad will sit here as long as I'm here to remind me of Murray. But Murray and John were the instigators of the school musical. In 1980, we had our first big musical, and it was called Salad Days. Just a couple of little points of interest. That little person there is Megan Fetties, who was the lab assistant here until the end of last year. So the same year, John put on his production of Jotham, which has to be my favourite musical. Mason, at the time he was at school, he was a professional country and western singer, and he played the part of narrator, and he also sang my very favourite song called There's One More Angel in Heaven. The next year, another John Livingston, Murray Hill production, Oklahoma. A little bit sad looking at that one. The lad who played the leading role in that has since died. 1982 got a bit more serious with Godspell. That was a difficult one to take on. That is a true rock opera. And the lead in that was Michael Schmidt. I haven't seen Michael since, but I've heard that he studied opera at the conservatorium since then. Now, Robin Hood. It's rather unique. That was actually written by students and a teacher. Lester Ford, who is now at Beenleigh High School, was actually a languages teacher, but extremely gifted in the musical field. In fact, if we went back to Salad Days, there's photos of him there. He took the production, and my memory there is of him reading a Bible, I think it was, and actually doing a full, like a cartwheel without his hands touching the ground. The originals, this is the arrival of Mrs. Macpherson, the first one that she produced in the school, based on early Australian history. That's on that side there, still some Wizard of Oz over here. Interesting photo there. David Sowden, I don't know if you'd remember, who was involved in the sounds and the lights there. He's gone on and done very well for himself. Still turns up to help here occasionally, but at one stage he was working on the lighting for cats without any particular training, just enthusiasm. So it's a good example of where you can get with enthusiasm.
Now, whether it was simply because of the 40 years on celebration, excuse me again. This is Gary Evans, And
I went to BBC, not Wynnum.
You're the odd man out.
Gary Evans, the editorial manager.
How are you?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, good. That's a coincidence, isn't it?
What, Jeff and I?
No, but all the people from Wynnum.
Oh, Phil Dickey, isn't it?
Phil, Peter Coe,
Brian Williams.
Tracy Walker. There's heaps more.
Did any of you know each other? You only remember the kids.
Tracy and I were in the same form class.
Were you?
We started
Tracy
year 8 together.
Tracy lived across
Sorry.
the road. He was right across the road.
Yeah, Tracy used to wag school and come from roll market.
Right.
And that was all. I know my parents were very happy at the fact that I was going to Wynnum High. They weren't worried that something horrible would happen to me. They weren't worried that I would fall in with a bad crowd when I got there, as I'm sure parents sometimes worry when their kids are going to high school. And there were very few people from my primary school that bothered to go off and go to private schools. Maybe it was money that dictated that, but very few even went to interviews at State High, which I think a lot of people would do. If they wanted to get a good education, they might try to do that. There was no need. We went to Wynnum High. It was a good school with a good reputation. Mr. I think it was Bob Jeffrey, the vice principal, when I started in 1982, used to always tell it's another cliche every assembly. We don't want a school of champions, we want a champion school. And that was the way it was.
Did you find generally the teachers very dedicated and
extremely so.
motivated?
Extremely so. I think it's only now, as you're very much an old, you realise the effort it takes. When you're young, you think it's part of their job, but it wasn't. And the hours that went into the musicals put in astounds me. The hours that they that they did. They gave their weekends away, they gave their after-school hours away. The teachers that took us, I was in the debating team when I was, I think, in year 10, in year 11 or something. The hours that they put in to take us up, or to assist supervisors, the camps, the hours the teachers put in there, the sporting teams, the coaching after school, you really felt that they were dedicated.
Worked out with friends. As I said, well, at least in the late 70s there wasn't a cinema because the Imperial burnt down. Dave Mitchell's history class for half of grade 8, and he used to sit up the front of the class and stroke his beard. He was quite an awesome sight to a class of 25 or so 13-year-olds, and he largely maintained discipline through fairly biting wit and sarcasm. We were introduced to a lot of newer literature through John Livingston. We spent a lot of time on the Mersey poets and the pop poets of the 1960s, which I think he liked, Roger McGuff and so on. But on the other hand, you still had the option to be able to study more classical literature with his open approach to learning and to English assignments.
So
no, I enjoyed that.
Talking in the classroom, just discussion.
Oh, a great deal of talking. Yes. English periods were rarely quiet. Also, what I appreciated about her is that she was thorough in the grammar. That was something I didn't pick up in English, but I did pick up learning French. And what I learnt in grammar from her, I've carried through in university studies, where all of a sudden grammar and construction and the right use of language became much more important. So I'm most grateful for what she was able to give us in French particularly.
Become more confident, I have a lot of freedom to introduce those things myself, and that's what I've done with team teaching. And you know, I really value the tremendous sense of freedom in the classroom that I have here, not only from the school and its sort of democratic atmosphere, spirit, but my particular subject master. You know, in English, we are able to introduce, you know, so many new ideas. We have a lot of freedom compared with other schools that I've been associated with, and I think that's a major plus.
Some of these came together is perhaps in this poem, which is from a forthcoming book. The book will be called Still Waiting for the Thunder, and this is the first poem that I wrote at Wynnum High School. It was specifically about Wynnum High School. I came here in the middle of the year, and of course any time you go to a new school you discover there are certain little quirks and kinks about that school. And in this case there was an 8 o'clock bell. The students couldn't come into the yard till 8 o'clock in the morning. There's also, at every school you go to, different ways of playing different games, simply because of the geography of the playground. So that handball's played differently at every school you ever go to, depending on the sizes and shapes of the ground, and you know, whoever the biggest kid was in 1958 who made up the rules, and so on and so forth. Well, with this one, which is called Local Practices, I combined a few of the local things, that 8 o'clock bell, the fact that Wynnum High is on the railway line, and in fact I was coming to work on the rail. And on this particular day, 8 o'clock was going to indicate something else happening elsewhere in the world, something very important that I might want to forget about, but wouldn't be able to because of that bell. Local practices. The flag hangs limp on its pole as the new work week begins. There's the 8 o'clock bell, to let the kids into the yard. A train slows its pace along the gradient near the school, and in a neighbouring country, 2 corpses on rope pendulums mark the passing of time. My prayers have proved futile, or not earnest enough. I spill blood onto a page.
School has continued to enrol its students in TAFE type programs that are offered both at the school and in the TAFE institutions. In fact, this year, over 100 students in both semesters undertook these courses. Now, obviously, this is going to continue to promote this twinning, or these twin credentials, because obviously it improves students' potentials to gain employment when they leave school. Let me just highlight some of the innovations, in particular this year. One, the most obvious one, is our Business Education Centre, which came on stream this year. Obviously, it's a very exciting facility and available to our commerce students. The hardware and the software are very latest technology. As Pat said earlier in his address, the school made this conscious decision to buy laptop computers this year. And obviously these are the tools of today and tomorrow. This year also saw the introduction of the automation to the library resources collection. I can assure parents tonight and friends of the school that both staff and students are indeed excited by this. Obviously, that brief report from me and the more full report that you have in your hands tonight indicates that this school is in a process of constant change and evaluation. And I'm sure that the schools in the 90s are going to have to maintain this dynamism and this flexibility if we are to continue to meet the needs of our students throughout the 90s.